Hi, guys, and welcome to the Quinn podcast. Here we give you a look through the eyes of the most successful athletes, entertainers, entrepreneurs, and influencers on this planet. Be sure to check out all of the content at quinnpodcast.com. Enjoy the episode. What I was reading up on you mentioned the loneliness epidemic. I think that's an interesting one to start off on. Can you elaborate on that for me?
Sure, man. So my show, Travis Makes Friends, kind of was. I rebranded it from Build Your Network. So I had a show for a long time. It's called Build Your Network. It was very much focused on like helping professionals network and things like that. And then I frankly just got kind of bored with the conversation. And so I wanted to start talking to more people outside of just kind of the business niche. And so I rebranded the show to Travis Makes Friends just in an effort to be able to go talk to comedians or entertainers or athletes. And I just found that those people were just less interested in talking about networking as they were about, random things. And so it was initially just kind of something that I did to be more broad. And then the more I started getting into this friendship idea, the more I uncovered about how crazy of a problem it actually is becoming. And now, in my opinion, I think loneliness is going to be the next great public health crisis. And it's not just me saying that, it's also the US Surgeon General released an entire report basically of the warning signs of loneliness and then the repercussions of loneliness. And it was a full study that you can read online. And I was just blown away by the results of that study, that over 50% of US adults are reporting feelings of loneliness. And then it's not just that people are lonely, it's the insidious nature of loneliness in general, meaning that it is the catalyst, it's the root problem that's causing a lot of the mental health crisis, I believe, is stemming from feelings of loneliness. What happens is we have symptoms of other things. We have anxiety or depression or insert mental health problem here, but we're treating these isolated symptoms rather than looking at the root cause of the problem. And loneliness is one of those big causes. And if you really think about it, it makes a lot of sense, just based on our biology. We just a recent in time in human history, we were hunter gatherers, and lack of community, not having people around you, would literally mean death. If you were left behind in a tribe of hunter gatherers, it's just a matter of time before you die. It's baked into our
Sure.
DNA to desire community, to be with other people. And so that anxiety that crops up when you're feeling these feelings of loneliness it's because your brain is literally switching into a fight or flight state, because it's causing you to feel like you're disconnected from the tribe, from the community. And when we have those feelings of disconnection, it will inevitably lead into bad mental health issues, because you're constantly in this parasympathetic state. You can't get out of this constant state of anxiousness, of nervousness, of being scared, because you're lonely, but you don't really know that that's what's happening, so you just call it anxiety, and then you get some pill prescribed to you to help you be less anxious or something like that. And it's like, okay, well, we're kind of treating the symptom there, but if we want to get to the root of the problem, loneliness is one of those roots of the problem. So it's responsible for a lot of the mental health stuff, but it's also, what was crazy to me is seeing the detriment that it causes to your physical health. Just being lonely for your physical health is worse than smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day, which is wild for your physical health. Again, like the mental health stuff, to me, when I read it, it still blew my mind how rampant it was, but at least it made sense. I was like, okay, well, I could see how those two things correlate. But it turns out there's an increase, a double-digit percentage increase in all-cause mortality due to internal feelings of loneliness. It's worse than smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It's worse than drinking 4 alcoholic beverages a day. It can have detrimental effects on bringing any of the major 4 diseases through to fruition. Cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's, neurodegenerative disorders. it increases every single marker of inflammation within the body. It is an insidious problem. And what's further than that is that we are again sometimes treating the problem with the incorrect solution. So what I mean by that is that loneliness is not just a marker of an objective reality, meaning like so in the report they actually give you two definitions. There's loneliness, and then there's something called social isolation. And social isolation would be defined by the objective measurement of how much time you're spending with other people. So that one is pretty cut and dry. We can just look at your habits, look at your routines, and see how often you're spending time with those that you love. And
Right.
if you're socially isolated, then it's at least a simple solution to say, okay, well, you just need to go get around other people, and we can kind of solve this problem of social isolation. The more insidious nature of loneliness is that loneliness can exist even when you're inside of a group of people. Loneliness is subjective internal feelings of disconnection, which means that we don't really know exactly how to treat it completely. It's not as simple as just go get around other people. And we see this in public examples of people, like the Robin Williams of the world, who, famously took his own life. Somebody who seemed to bring so much life, so much joy, so much happiness to others. Somebody who checked in on his friends constantly, somebody who was adding value to the world around him and surrounded by people who loved and adored him. Yet he was suffering on the inside, internally, subjectively. There was no, cure that you could just be like, oh, go get around other people, go get a beer with your buddies. It's not about that. It's the internal feeling of disconnection that is the more insidious nature of the loneliness epidemic. So it is at epidemic levels, and I think it's only going to get worse, especially social media and things like that kind of exacerbate the problem. COVID was an accelerant, a massive accelerant to loneliness. The advent of more virtual work has been an accelerant to loneliness. A large percentage of people's personal networks comes from the people that they work with, and now there's more people than ever just working out of the comfort of their own homes, which they think is a really good thing, but in actuality, it's just separating you and isolating you further from people that you could develop relationships with and find meaning and joy and happiness in those relationships. So it's a problem, man, and it's only getting worse at the moment.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned COVID. I remember I saw it coming too. I was, I believe, 17 at the time. And I was getting out of high school. It was exactly like the year I was getting out of high school and into college.
Yeah.
But everything was online, right? So I had my classes online, and like the relationships from COVID dried or from high school dried up. I saw it coming. I was like, this is going to be something, but it hit me like nothing else. And it's
Yeah.
yeah, and
Well,
it
it's
took
crazy.
I want to say like 2 or 3 years to climb out of that. And even
Yeah.
to this day, sometimes I'm like,
Yeah.
I feel like emotions I didn't feel before. It was pretty
Well, what's
crazy.
crazy is
Yeah.
that it was pouring fuel on an already burning fire. Loneliness
Mhm.
is ever since I believe it was Harvard that came up. Actually, maybe UCLA came up with a test basically that you can take. It's publicly available. You can search it and take it. That tells you like how lonely you are.
Mhm.
And ever since they've started measuring loneliness in the 70s, it has been getting worse every year since then. So it was already a problem that a lot of people didn't realize. And then I think the combination of social media and COVID was just like it just started pouring a bunch of gasoline on the fire and making it worse. So COVID is obvious. Social media to me is again one of those more sneaky ways that people are being more isolated because it's confusing. It literally is called social media. It inherently implies that the activity means you're being social and connecting with people. When in reality, we should be focusing more on the media portion of the phrase rather than the social portion of the phrase. Your social media activities should be looked at as media consumption. It's no different than sitting in front of your TV and watching Netflix in terms of what it does in your brain. You know what I mean? So you can't look at it as like, oh, well, I spent some time on social media. That's my connection for the day. That's not connection. That's media activity. That's an entertainment source. It's not going to bring about genuine, real connection with other human beings. So People think that it's taking care of the problem when in actuality it's making it worse. And again, virtual work is making it worse. The COVID made it worse. There's so many external factors that are contributing to the widespread loneliness epidemic.
How do you see that in cases of like you mentioned, like people being around other people but still feeling lonely? How do you see that?
Yeah, like how do you see it play out?
Yeah, what's like the reason behind that?
Well, I mean, I still don't know. Ultimately, I'm been researching a bunch of this stuff, and I'm not even sure anybody else really knows. The best answer that I can find is it's most probably well said, succinctly said by Anthony DeMello in his book. I believe it's Awareness. And he says the antidote to loneliness is aloneness, meaning that if you're suffering from internal subjective feelings of loneliness, the most likely root cause of the problem is your inability to connect with, accept, and love yourself. And that is bleeding into your relationships with everybody else. And so in that, he kind of says the foundation of happiness, the foundation of a good relationship with others is a good relationship with you. And I think we have never been more disconnected from ourselves. We are on this crazy search for acceptance from others. Again, especially with the heightened reality of social media, we tend to focus on the things that we don't have instead of the things that we do have. We tend to focus on the things that we can't control rather than the things that we can control. And all of this is causing an internal battle, an internal struggle. And, people can't even spend time alone anymore. They don't have respect for themselves because of their daily actions. They don't have belief in themselves because of their daily thought patterns. And if you don't trust yourself, if you don't respect yourself, if you don't love yourself unconditionally, how can you expect anybody else to do any of those things? And then how can you provide that for anybody else? It's kind of the misconception behind even marriage relationships is that, I'm getting married so that I can be happy, so that this person can provide happiness, so that this person can fill the emptiness that I feel inside of me. And that's not how it works. Each person in a marriage is responsible for their own happiness. And then you come together and help each other out along that journey. It's not, my wife is not responsible for me being happy, nor am I responsible for her being happy. We're responsible for our own happiness. It's just that when we come together, we have a more likely chance of figuring out, why we are the way that we are. In a good relationship, it's somebody that sharpens you, makes you better, makes you want to improve yourself, makes you want to improve the relationship that you have with yourself. So I tell people, go be by yourself for a little bit. And if you find that practice extremely uncomfortable, then that should probably tell you that there's a little bit of a problem. Like if you can't go for a walk or if you can't go for a drive without having a podcast on, without having music on, without having any distractions on, or having to watch Netflix or have somebody else there or call somebody on the phone, if you can't just be with yourself, then there's probably an issue there. And no substances, by the way, no pills, no weed, no alcohol, no mushrooms, just you by yourself, sober, with some water or whatever. If you can't be alone with your thoughts for a little bit of time without having to medicate or be around somebody else or have a distraction on, then that tells me that and it should tell you rather that there's an issue with how you view yourself. And if there's an issue with how you view yourself, it's going to bleed into all of the rest of your relationships. It can't help but bleed into those relationships. So, I ultimately believe that it's going to be a test of whether or not you can reconnect with who you are, with what you want out of the world. And we have to learn to view ourselves as worthy. We have to learn to respect ourselves, which means that you're going to have to take some actions that are worthy of your own respect, right? Like it doesn't just come overnight. It doesn't just come by you repeating some affirmations in the mirror. It's going to come from you fundamentally changing the way that you interact with yourself. So that's like the good news is that there's probably an indicator that you found the root of the problem. The bad news is it's going to take work. There's no magic pill. You're gonna have to learn to take actions that make you respect and love you, rather than have this internal struggle, this internal conflict that you can't solve. It's like the bottom line is, dude, you are the only person who will spend every single waking second of the rest of your life with you. So you better learn to love yourself, or it's going to be a long, bumpy ride.
Sure. Yeah. Have you met like guys that were in that bad spot and like practical examples of how they got out of it, like actions they took?
You know, I haven't done enough work with people one-on-one to like help solve the problem. But for me, it was always a matter of doing small things that helped me build better habits and take actions that made me respect and trust myself more. So, for instance, I don't make a lot of promises because I learned really quickly that most people make promises and then just don't keep them. So I don't make a ton of commitments when it comes to what I'm going to do on a daily basis. So like when I first got started in the kind of this online space and like kind of personal development world, you look at all these different things that people are doing. It's like, okay, well, I got to get a morning routine, and then I got to stop eating junk food, and I got to get in the gym, and I got to start reading books, and I got and you have this entire list of 14 different things that you're going to do differently tomorrow, and you've never done any of them before. And you're used to sleeping in and getting up at 9:45, but tomorrow I'm going to get up at 5 a.m. And then you've never gone for a run before, but tomorrow I'm going to go for a run. And you don't read, but tomorrow I'm going to read. And then you've never meditated, but tomorrow I'm going to meditate. I'm going to write my affirmations, and I'm going to journal, and then I'm going to get some breath work done. And then you put this impossible list of things together to go from 0 to 100 in 24 hours. And ultimately you don't keep up with it because, first of all, it's impossible to keep up with. Second of all, you probably shouldn't even be doing all of those things. Like, this is probably wasting time that you could be taking to actually put into things that are productive for your day. But you build this list of things and you say, like, I'm going to do this for 7 days, or I'm going to do this for 30 days or whatever. And then 3 days in, you quit. All that does is build a lack of confidence, a distrust in you, in your ability to come through for you. A lot of people will keep promises to everybody else in their life, but they'll never keep a promise that they make to themselves. Start there. Start with small little actions, small little things that you can do that say, hey, tomorrow I'm getting up at 6 a.m. Okay, great. Get up at 6 a.m. no matter what. Even if you're tired, even if you're lethargic for the day, figure out how you can take a nap, get some caffeine in your system, whatever it takes to keep the promise that you made to yourself is what's required to start building self-respect. Like I said, it's not going to come overnight just by you writing down, I respect myself, over and over and over again. It's going to come from doing actions that make you respect you. Think about the people in your life that you have tremendous respect for. What do they do? Start doing some of the things that those people do. Is it the habits? Is it the action? Like what exactly are those people doing that makes you respect them? And how can you emulate some of those things in your life? But just take it slowly. Like you have to build momentum, and you have to build a relationship with starting with this, like, small things. Again, whether it's, hey, I'm going to drink first thing in the morning, I'm going to drink water with electrolytes. Like I have this LMNT stuff. It's just a bunch of electrolytes that I like to drink in the morning. Like, cool. I'm going to, I've been feeling lethargic. I hear hydration might be the root of that problem. Starting tomorrow, I'm going to drink a liter of water every morning with electrolytes in it. Okay, great. Do that. Do that every single day. Set an alarm on your phone. Do what it takes. Do not forget to do that. You will wake up in 30 days respecting yourself more. I promise you. It's a drug that you get addicted to when you start realizing that, like, wow, I did something that I didn't think I was going to be able to do, and I made it work and I made it happen. It's whatever, go for a mile walk. That's why I'm saying, like, you don't have to run a freaking marathon every day. Like, you don't have to go from 0 to 100 to start building this better relationship, to start having more respect for yourself. But whatever you say you're going to do, you need to do it. So that's why I say, like, that's why I said at the beginning of this, I don't make a bunch of commitments because I don't want to break those promises. I don't want to have a different relationship with everybody else than I have with me. You know, like I said earlier, people will do whatever it takes to keep a promise that they made to somebody else, and then immediately break the promise that they made to themselves the next day. You know, people will talk to themselves negatively all the time. They'll say how they'll sit there and be like, man, I'm so dumb, I'm so stupid, I'm so this, I'm so that, I can't do anything, and they have all this horrible negative self talk. When if anybody else in their life talked to them even a fraction of how poorly they're talking to themselves, they would immediately like punch them in the face, like slap them, get rid of them, never spend any time with them, because it's insanely disrespectful to use that type of language when you're talking to other people, but somehow it's okay to do that to you. You have to look at those things and take it very seriously. Like, you can't have all this negative self-talk. You can't be talking yourself down all the time to yourself in your own mind, you know, because those thoughts become reality at some point. You know, the first time you think something does not make it truth. It's the second time, it's the third time, it's the fourth time that you start internalizing it, you make it true, and then you start believing it. And then once you believe it, you look for the reasons to believe that you're worthless. You know, if you start building that belief, well, I'm worthless, then every time you do something, every time you don't keep that promise, you just go, see, I'm worthless, I can't do it. You know what I mean? You just start, it becomes it's self-fulfilling prophecy, where you're just in this endless cycle, this pattern of disbelief, distrust, and disrespect for you. And if you are constantly doing that to yourself, guess what type of person you're going to be to the people around you? You're going to be constantly seeking validation from everybody else, from the people on social media, from the people close to you, from mentors, from guides, from relationships. And that's probably why a lot of those relationships aren't working out, because you're putting the onus on everybody else in your life to fix these internal problems that are really just stemming from the fact that you don't like you. So you got to start with that one first.
I read you had quite the journey of like figuring out yourself before you started the podcast. Um, Elaborate on that a bit. Like, what was that like between like quitting the sales job and then starting the show?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm still on that journey. You know, I think we're, if you're not constantly taking stock for where you are, or trying to gain clarity for where you're headed, then, you know, that's where you end up. I tell people, like, a bad case scenario in life is to end up at the top of somebody else's mountain. You know, like, and accomplishing anything worthwhile is going to be difficult. But a pretty bad case scenario is like working your ass off to climb to the top of a mountain. You get to the very top, and then you peak the mountain. You're up there looking at the view, and you're like, I didn't want any of this. You know, I actually wanted to be on the top of that mountain. And then you got to like climb all the way down, start from scratch, and go climb another mountain. You know what I mean? Where if you would have gotten clarity when you were a third of the way up the mountain and not allowed yourself to sink into the sunk cost fallacy of having to continue the climb when you don't want to, then you could have just climbed back down when you were at a third of the way up and go climb the mountain that you really want to climb, you know? So constantly taking clarity, getting clarity is a really good thing. So I don't feel like I've, you know, arrived at that yet. It's definitely something that I try to do constantly, but yeah, at the beginning of this, it was mainly just because I had enough clarity to know what I didn't want to do. And door-to-door sales was that. I was in door-to-door for a few years out of college, and it was really the only way I knew how to make money. Nobody would give me a job, which still to this day blows my mind, bro. Like, I was like this young, hungry, married 22-year-old kid that was making six figures knocking doors for 100% commission sales jobs. And then I would try to go like apply for like a quote unquote real sales job, and nobody would hire me. And that might say something about how bad of an interviewer I was. Maybe I just sucked at being interviewed. But you know, I think it was also just because people saw my age and thought that they couldn't take me seriously or something. But I don't know. It was just as a person who hires people now, like, I would have looked at that and been like, yeah, you're hired. Yeah, like, you're coming up with deals, 100% commission on doors, and we're going to give you a salary, a company car, and company generated leads. Like, yeah, I think you're probably going to do pretty well here, you know? But they were looking more for experience and things. So I couldn't get a job. The only thing I knew how to do was door to door, and I didn't want to do it anymore. And I had enough foresight to understand that most things were heading online at that time. And so I was like, okay, well, I got to figure out how to make some money online, because I want the ultimate freedom in my life. I want the ability to choose my schedule, choose the people I'm around, choose the income that I make, but also choose my physical location in the world. I like to travel. I want to be out and about. I want to be flexible. And with door to door, it was like I was making good money, but every time I left to go on a trip or to, you know, go to the Bahamas with my wife or something like that, it's like, well, when I'm gone, I'm not making money because I'm not on doors. So I don't like that. So I was actively just looking for something else to do. And then podcasting kind of came like one of the mediums by which I discovered new information, and just kind of fell in love with the format and the medium, and was like, this would be kind of a cool way to make money. Do people make money doing this? And a little bit more research found that people actually made money talking on microphones and discussing certain topics. So ended up starting the podcast probably a year and a half, 2 years after I really started becoming a podcast listener. And that was, almost 8 years ago now.
It's pretty cool. Why do you think the show works for you? Like building it up, like having like an income from it, and the level of it. Like, why does it work? The format the way you do it.
Probably just because I kept doing it. Almost anything can work if you stick with it long enough, and you're willing to learn from each previous, opportunity. For a while, it didn't work. For a couple of years, I was so burnt out. I kept producing content because I knew that's what you're supposed to do. But I was getting so bored with the conversations. It started becoming like a time suck in my calendar rather than something that I really looked forward to. But eventually it was just more like, that's why I ended up pivoting the show a couple of times, was just like, what's going to keep me excited about doing this? So I think that's ultimately what it is, man. It's just like being willing to stick in the game longer than everybody else. And if something's not working, you pivot. And if that's not working, you pivot again. And then you just keep doing that time and time again while continuing to stay in the game.
Like for me, like I want to know how you see this. Like, what are the numbers to get this to like be a full-time income? Like, what do you have to do? What does that look like? Because I've been doing this I started this in 2019 and I did it till 2021. Took like 2 years off and now I'm back on it.
Okay.
How do you see that?
Yeah, well, from a practical standpoint, if you want to get like enough sponsors and things like that to make a full-time income, and obviously full-time income is a subjective term for,
Sure.
For a young single guy, it looks a lot different than somebody like me with married and 2 kids. But full-time, let's just say for your podcast to make let's call it $5,000 a month.
Mm-hmm.
Most podcast advertisers will pay anywhere from a $15 to $25 CPM. So let's take an average and say $20 CPM. CPM is cost per 1,000 impressions, or in the podcasting world, cost per 1,000 downloads. So if you have 4 ad spots available on an episode at $20 per ad spot at 1,000 downloads per episode, then you get $80 an episode. So if you're releasing 4 episodes a month, you're at $320 at 1,000 downloads an episode. So, if you want to get that to $3,200 a month, you got to be at 10,000 downloads an episode for 4 episodes a month. And then if you want to be at $6,400, you got to be at 20,000 downloads an episode for 4 episodes a month. But the nice thing though about podcasting now is that most platforms have something called DAI, dynamic ad insertion. So we no longer have to measure it on an episode by episode basis. You can do it on your total monthly downloads because you can insert that ad across your entire library dynamically, hence dynamic ad insertion. So if you're getting 100,000 downloads a month, then you can monetize the whole 100,000 downloads. Now you'll never sell out 100% of your available ad inventory. So that's also something to consider, so let's say you're selling 70% of your existing ad inventory, so if you get 130,000 downloads a month, 70% of that ish is about 100,000 downloads. So you have 100,000 downloads to sell. You're making, $20 CPM for 4 spots per episode. So $80 times 100, that's $8,000.
I've never thought of it this way. It's fascinating to me.
Theoretically.
Yeah.
But it's different. That's a lot of downloads. That's a small number. That's not a small number. So when I first started my show, I just monetized through building my own products and services. And then last year was really when we just kind of started realizing sponsorship revenue was upticking a little bit, just because we've been doing it for so long. And then this year was the first year that we were like, what if what if we just focused on this full time? I wonder what we could turn this revenue into. So that's kind of the path that we're on right now. We'll make well into six figures this year on sponsorship revenue, but I'm also reinvesting a good portion of the money back into growing the show, getting more production, getting more clips out, and things like that. So we're not taking any money out of it. We're just like taking every dollar we make and dumping it back into the show, because we want to try to turn it into a 7-figure show to be able to really do it full time. So, ask me in a year how it's going and I'll let you know.
That's fascinating to me, though. I've never thought of it this way. This is pretty funny. I've never took on a sponsor either. Like sometimes they go like, "Hey, I'll give you a free product, this and that." But that's cool. That's fine.
Yeah, it's an option, man. It's an option. It's a real option. Like I said, you just have like the difference is what's your product or service. If you have a business, then the podcast is just a lead gen source for your business, for the product or service that you offer inside of your company. But there are other shows that are the show itself is the product, which is where these are the shows that make all the sponsorship revenue. They don't have a ton of like programs and a bunch of other stuff that they're selling off the back of it. Typically, they make money because they put all their effort into creating a really good quality free show. And so the sponsors are willing to pay the money to get in front of that audience,
Yeah. When you say I put time and money into like making it a 7-figure show, what does that mean? Like, how do you
first off,
get it to that level?
Yeah, we try to make everything just look better, be more professional. We try to be omnipresent now on all the platforms. So I pay my producer and my assistant to help me out with those things. So it's covering their salaries, and then it's actually dumping money back into advertising. Once you feel like you've built a good quality product in the show itself, and there's real value to be gained there from a listener perspective, then it's just about getting the show in front of more people. So whether that's going and getting yourself booked on other podcasts within your niche, whether that's buying ads on Google or boosting videos on YouTube or buying, in-platform audio ads, like whatever it is, like it's just you're buying advertising to get the show in front of more people and hoping that the downloads that you're acquiring are outpacing the money that you make on the show. Like meaning that it costs you less to acquire a download than it does for you to charge for that download to a sponsor. So that's more or less what I mean.
Yeah. Interesting. Never thought of it this way. It's cool. I've had some great guys on. You've had some cooler guys on. You've had Shaq on. You've had GC on. It was pretty cool. What goes into securing guys like that?
Oh man, it's probably one of the biggest questions that I get, and I never have a great answer because it's just a lot of hustle over a long period of time, man. It's like at first it feels like my door-to-door days, because at first it's like a numbers game. When I got started, I didn't have anything. I didn't have a bunch of money. I didn't have a good network of people I could start with. I didn't have connections in the space. I was a 24-year-old kid that was doing door-to-door sales. I didn't have any assets to pull from to draw big names onto my show. There was no reason for anybody to say yes. Until eventually I got one person to say yes, just from reaching out all the time. And then after the first person says yes, it's just a little bit easier to get the second person to say yes. And then once the second person says yes, it's a little bit easier to get the third and the fourth and the fifth and the sixth. And it just kind of keeps continuing to snowball. And then over 3 or 4 years, what happens is that you start becoming known as the person that's constantly looking for people like that. So now people are making introductions to you, or you can ask for introductions from people that you already know that had a great time on your show, and they're an advocate of yours now, and they're happy to help out by just making a quick text intro to somebody that would have never responded to a cold DM. So the answer is I use everything and like anything at my disposal, whether it's Facebook Messenger, commenting on somebody's post, Instagram cold DM, tweeting at somebody on X, cold email, asking for email intros from existing friends, showing up at events where I know people I want on my show are going to be hanging out so I can meet them in person, and pull out all stops on that front, man. Because like, to me, it was like, especially when I was first getting started, it was like, nobody's going to listen to me. And frankly, nobody should, like I said, I was a 24-year-old door-to-door sales guy. Like I didn't have a ton of stuff to offer in terms of information and value, but I knew that if I could go get some of the best people in the world on, that people would listen to those. All I had to do was continue to get better at the skill of crafting good interviews and asking good questions. And if I could solidify in the mind of a listener that I'm somebody who asks good questions, then they might stick around after they listen to their favorite person on my show. They might go, "Hey, well, the Travis guy actually asked some pretty good questions. I wonder what other interviews he does," and they might stick around. You know what I mean? So that was kind of my thought process behind it. But yeah, I don't have a great answer because it was like I've used everything, man, whatever I possibly can.
No, for sure. With a guy like Grant Cardone, I've been chasing that dude for 4 or 5 years now, I think.
Yeah.
What does the cold outreach look like? Like, what do you tell him specifically? Because I DM'd you, right? I'm like, I've had this and this guy on, Frank 32, I believe. Would love to have you on. What does the message to him look like?
It was literally that.
Okay.
I DM'd him when I first started and never got a response. And then probably a year into it, I had gotten probably 7 or 8 people on my show that I knew that he had done business with. They were speaking on his stage. He had close interaction with. And so when I reached out and DM'd him the second time, I name dropped all of those people, one of them being his wife, one of them being Elena. And then I said, I was like, I'm going to be in Miami next week doing some interviews. It'd be cool to drop by and do it in person. He said, "Come see us," and then sent me his executive assistant's cell phone number, and then I set it up from there. So to be fair, this was like 2018 or something like that, 2019. So it was before Grant was as big as he is now. So it was probably a little bit easier to get his attention in a cold DM. It might be a lot more difficult now, just because he's gotten way bigger in that time frame. But yeah, that was exactly what I did at the time.
No, I have the entry. Like, he once responded to me a couple of times actually, so I can still DM. I'm like, I got to get it to a level where it's like a no-brainer for him. But
Yeah, that's really it, man. That's really it. Is like you got to make it as easy as possible for people to say yes. So
yeah.
whenever somebody tells me no, I just take it as a not yet, and I reach back out in a year. Like a Jack Canfield, the author of Chicken Soup for the Soul, that sold like 500 million copies around the planet. It took me like 11 months of emailing him once a month. The first like 4 or 5 months, he didn't even respond. I knew that I had the right email because I got it from somebody who was a friend of his. And they were like, "Yeah, just, email him and tell him that you, that I sent you." So I was like, great. So I had an email. It wasn't an introduction, but I had the email and I had that person say that I could use their name in the email. And still didn't respond to me for like 4 months. And so like once a month or like once every 6 to 8 weeks or something, I would just send an update about the show. Just so people, like, you don't want people to get the feeling that you're desperate for their yes in order to make your show successful. You want to give the idea of like, the train is leaving the station with or without you, but I would love for you to be on board because I love your content or you've made a difference in my life or something like that. So, but we're going places either way. So that's why I say, like, I updated him with just like, "Hey, since my last reach out, we've done, this episode with this person, this episode with this person, this episode with this person." And it reminded me to reach back out to you because I still have a question about this particular aspect of, the thing that you're really good at. And, how can we get this done? So it was about 9-10 months of reaching out before we finally got that one in person, got that one scheduled. But, when we did, I got to go to Jack Canfield's house in Santa Barbara, set up a interview setup in his living room. And then when I left, he gave me a glowing recommendation. I think it's an endorsement that still sits on my website today. That's an endorsement from Jack Canfield saying that, Travis is one of the young personal development leaders of our day or something like that. That came directly from Jack. So it was like, was it worth following up with him that many times? I think so. I learned a lot from him and he was willing to support me from that going forward. And sometimes those successful people just want to see that you're persistent enough to stay in the game. Jack Canfield famously got rejected over 100 and something times for Chicken Soup for the Soul by publishers. over 100 publishers rejected the proposal for Chicken Soup for the Soul, but he kept going, pushing through rejection, pushing through rejection, pushing through rejection. And now it's one of the best selling, personal development books of all time. And like I said, they've sold over 500 million copies of their entire series, because now they have Chicken Soup for the Soul for the runner, Chicken Soup for the Soul for the, they have so many different little like niche co-authored projects, and it's been translated into so many languages that it's become, one of the best-selling self-help books of all time. But he pushed through 100+ publisher rejections. So sometimes people like that just want to see that you have that same persistence factor in you,
like testing you. Yeah.
Yeah, but you don't want to be annoying about it. You don't want to like get mad and get upset and demand their time. That's not how you do it. Like I was just professionally persistent, just like, hey, just checking in. Just want to give you a quick update. This is what's been happening in the meantime. Would still love to get you on sometime. Let me know if we can make it work. You know what I mean? And a lot of times people like that will respect that type of hustle.
Yeah, no, it's like you said, it's hustling. That's cool. You mentioned the cultivating the skill of like interviewing, right? What are some of like lessons you've experienced in that? Because at times I'm like interviewing guys, I'm like, this could be better. How do you see that?
Yeah, that was a surprise for me. Honestly, when I first was started, I was so worried about like my equipment setup and like the RSS feed and the website and the tech talking to each other, that I didn't even think about the interviewing. I just I listed out a bunch of questions and I was like, this will be fine. And I hit record, and then I asked the first question, and then they answered it in like 23 seconds. And I was like, oh shit, I have to fill like the next 30 minutes with stuff. So I just like started reading the questions that I had written. Like it was so bad. It was one of the skills that was like a surprise skill. But now it's kind of become my strength, because ultimately, again, like you can get really great people on, but there's several examples of friends that I have in the space where like I've interviewed somebody after they've interviewed them, and that person was like, yeah, it was like an awkward conversation. It just like didn't flow very well and whatever. And these are the guests telling me this after we had a conversation, because they liked the way that I conducted the interview or the conversation. And so afterwards, it has a huge impact on whether or not that guest is going to share the episode with their audience, whether or not that guest is going to connect you with other people in their network. It has a significant impact. So I realized that pretty early on, and just started really trying to work on my ability to craft narratives and to have interesting conversations that other people weren't having with the people that I was bringing on the show. So in terms of like what to do about it, I mean, there's a few things that I walk people through when I'm doing coaching and things, but ultimately, man, I've found it's just a matter of repetitions. It's just getting the reps in and doing it over and over again. And then in your free time, just listening to really good interviewers, listening to people who are really good at crafting conversation. Say what you want about Joe Rogan. A lot of people are upset with him right now, but he's one of the best conversationalists in the world. For somebody to be able to jump on a 3.5 hour podcast to talk about insert topic of conversation here. Like he talks to psychologists and then neuroscientists and then rocket scientists and then evolutionary biologists and then creationists and then comedians. And he talks to so many different types of people and has 3-hour plus conversations with them. That is
no monitor in front of him. Yeah.
Right. That is a skill, man. To be able to keep that going in a somewhat natural flow is not easy. And people severely underestimate the level of skill that guy has. But then I also have people I listen to that are more traditional interviewers, like Jordan Harbinger, who's a friend and mentor of mine, who's got a great show called The Jordan Harbinger Show. I listen to his show all the time because he's an effortless, brilliant interviewer that gets really great stuff from people. Like if you listen to somebody who is on Jordan's show and they've been on 6 or 7 other shows, maybe they're promoting a book or something, but you listen to their episode on Jordan's, it's always going to be different and better, just because he's just that good of an interviewer. So I try to consume as much as I can from people whose content I like to emulate in my conversational style. And then I also just try to like bring in my own twist to the conversation. But ultimately it's just going to be reps and then the content that you consume is going to help you as you work through your own style. But like few just kind of top things for me is do the preparation, especially if you don't have the experience. Over preparation will always be the antidote to lack of experience. So over prepare for interviews, read whatever you can on that person, listen to their past interviews, read their intro of their book, read the epilogue, read the dedication, but read between the lines and try to find the things that other people are not going to ask them about. My number one goal when I'm on an interview is just like, I got to get this person off of autopilot, especially if they're promoting something, if they're on a book tour or something like that. Like their publicist will literally send talking points, and a lot of people just go off of the talking points. So that conversation is just in their mind. It's been so scripted because they've been doing it. They've done 30 interviews in the last 2 weeks, and every single one of them sounds very, very, very similar to the last one. I don't want to be that guy. I want to jump on the interview with them, and I want them to I want them off of autopilot. I want them to have to start to think through answers to the questions that I'm asking, or I want them when they get off to be like, man, that was refreshing. That was a fun conversation. Thank you for taking the time to prepare something that was going to get me off course a little bit, because I actually enjoyed that. And so I try to get something out of them that they don't normally talk about, try to take an angle that most people don't take. I try to start where other people left off. You know what I mean? So there's a few things like that, but ultimately it's just going to come through repetitions.
Yeah, no, it's pretty good. You launched Guestio, when was it? 2-3 years ago?
Yep. 3-4 years ago now. Yeah.
What's that been like?
It's been a huge learning experience. It's been a cool journey, cool ride. I've never done anything in software before, and then we didn't ever do an agency work before, and we ended up doing both of those things. So learned a lot, man. It was a great experience. I'm actually in the middle right now of exiting that company just to get back into podcasting full time. Because if I learned anything, I learned that I didn't want to run a software company or agency model. So now I'm just kind of offloading that from my plate.
That's dope. So like full-time podcasting, that's a good spot to be in, bro.
That's the goal, dude. Yeah. I told my wife, I was like, I'm going to take like 2025, the full year, and just dedicate it to figuring out if I can turn this into significant full-time income. I didn't want it to be full-time if it was just like barely going to help me pay my bills. You know what I mean? Right. If I'm going to do it full time, I want it to allow us to live an abundant life. And so that's why we're dumping every dollar that we make back into growing the show at the moment, because the goal is to not take a dollar from the show until January 2026.
That's dope. Pretty cool. Yeah, the thing I wanted to ask you, like the guys you get on, like maintaining those relationships, that's a big one. How do you do that?
Somewhat naturally. The thing about relationships is that there's a certain alchemy that exists with all friendships and ongoing relationships that you can't really force. So I try to be aware of that and know that even if I think it would be cool to stay connected to this person, sometimes it's just not going to happen. And if you force it, all you're going to do is just annoy people. So I try not to force any relationships. I try to just have some emotional intelligence about whether or not somebody wants to continue connecting with me and hanging out with me. And then I hold space for those types of conversations. If I'm traveling and I know somebody I've interviewed is in a place that I'm staying, then it's like, hey, let's meet up, grab a coffee. Let's have another conversation on the podcast, or let's grab a beer or something like that. So I try to maintain contact with all those people. I'll try to go through my phone at least once a week. I sometimes more than that, where I just scrolled all the way down to the bottom of my messages and find people who I haven't talked to in 3 or 4 years, and I send them a quick video just to say, hey, thinking about you, hope you're doing well, let me know if there's anything I can do for you, type of a thing. So I'm fairly intentional about just continuing to stay in contact with people, even though I don't have an ask for them, to try to dig the well before you're thirsty, so to speak. So I try to constantly do that. I try to be a connector. I try to, if there's somebody that I'm connecting with and I know that somebody else that I know would be a really interesting introduction for them, and they might be in the same line of work, or they seem like people that would get along, then I'll make that introduction, because that's a valuable thing to introduce valuable people to each other. Never do that without both parties on board for it. That's a mistake I think some people make, is they are so eager to make the connection that they just like start sending intros. But you just never know what's like. You don't know if that person was like actively trying to avoid the person that you just introduced them to and put them together with in their inbox. Like, this literally happened to me, where people didn't ask me if they could make an intro, and then they introduced me to somebody who like I didn't really like and didn't have a good experience with, and now we're like having this awkward inbox intro conversation where I have to like pretend to be nice and not, and like try to get out of, you know what I mean. So always do the double opt-in intro if you're going to make the introductions, but making introductions can be a really valuable thing for all the people in your network. So I try to add value where I can, try to stay in touch where I can, send videos randomly to people within my network, try to grab dinner. I just stay on top of it, and I'm really intentional about continuing the relationship if that person also wants to continue the relationship. But also I've gotten much better at just letting go of relationships that just aren't really going anywhere, and like I said, would feel forced. And I don't want to be that guy either.
Yeah, I hear you for sure. Who's left on the list for you?
So many people, man. So many people. A lot of it in the comedy and entertainment world. There's a few like movie producers I'd like to talk to. There's a few comedians I would like to talk to. A few big podcasters I would like to talk to. The Andrew Hubermans, Lex Friedmans, Joe Rogans, but also, you know, some really big comedians, a few authors like Douglas Murray, some different people like that I'd like to talk to. It's endless. It never ends, dude. Never ends.
It never ends. It's an exciting space. I started in 2019, and people were like, "Oh, you're already late to it," and now it's like blowing up, and I feel like it's gonna be even bigger. And I had conversations over the weekend with people, and they're like, "Yeah, podcasting is where it's at right now."
As long as people are still listening, you're never too late.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like somebody asked me that the other day, like, was it too saturated? I was like, everything's saturated. What are you talking about? Like, there's 2 billion Instagram users, but you like every time somebody asks me that, I literally just go, are you on Instagram? Yes. What about TikTok? Yes. Okay. Well, you better not be, because it's too saturated. There's 2 billion creators making content over there. So you probably shouldn't be on YouTube. You probably shouldn't be on Instagram. You probably shouldn't be on TikTok. Oh, you're writing a book? That's funny. 500,000 books come out every year. You know, oh, you have a blog? Yeah, there's 500 million blogs. Like, you know how many podcasts there are?
Fuck them, probably.
There's only 4 million total podcasts in existence. Less than 500,000 of them are actually actively releasing episodes.
Oh, that's crazy.
Less than 500,000. So when you look at that compared to like blogs, it's quite literally 1% of the total, like of the blog volume that's out there.
It's only 4 million, really?
What's that?
It's only 4 million. That's crazy.
Only 4 million total shows. Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like less than 10% of those are actually actively releasing episodes still. So it's still a wide open space.
I think it was Jimmy Rex who told me, it's like if you upload more than 60, you're in like the 1% or something.
No, 10. 90% of podcasters won't make it past episode 10.
Really?
There's a bunch of dead shows, man. There's a podcast graveyard out there. So if you just actively release consistent content, you're already in the top like 10% of shows that have ever existed in terms of sticking around. So yeah, it's definitely not oversaturated. It's just what people tell themselves to avoid the work.
Yeah. Well, it's exciting, bro. It's a cool time for guys like us. So
absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to the Quinn podcast. If you enjoyed it, you can go to quinnpodcast.com to check out all of the previous episodes. quinnpodcast.com.